Welcome to X-Raced, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. I'm back to reconnect you with a brilliant mind leading change, driving innovation, and shaping a better future for business and society. I'm your host, Miles, and if you've been following our journey with ACI Global, you'll remember our episode exploring how leaders continue to grow beyond their initial success, how mentorship, continuous improvement, and ethical leadership can sustain excellence over time. Well, today we're taking that conversation a step further because leadership doesn't stop at being competent or experienced. It needs to evolve, adapt, and rise to the challenges of a world now driven by AI, data, and constant change. And that's exactly what we're unpacking in this episode, and someone is coming back. Our guest has been instrumental in helping organizations and professionals across the globe elevate their capability and credibility. A man whose work continues to redefine what continuous improvement really means. I'm very happy to welcome back the ever insightful Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, Ian Erskine. Hi, Ian.
Oh, Miles, it's so wonderful to be back and
Thank you.
to see that infectious grin of yours and uh, be involved with you as we progress with this. It is so exciting, and we have some very exciting news to discuss in this episode and over the next couple of weeks, in fact, in reference to leadership, because leadership really does now need to step up and we'll explain how in the coming few minutes.
Yes, and it's always great to have you with us, Ian. This topic, quality beyond AI, feels like a timely wake up call. So let's get right into it. Because when we talk about AI and automation, most people tend to focus on tech, the systems, the data, and the innovation. But you've consistently reminded us that real quality still begins and ends with people. How do you see the role of leadership evolving beyond the technical side of AI to ensure that human capability remains the heart of quality and sustainable success?
Well, I think this is something that is being missed quite conclusively around the world, and it was interesting. I sat next to a engineering quality software expert on the plane over from Australia to Singapore. And he was explaining quite confidently with me that their software had evolved so much that it was completely in control of all aspects of the projects, and they were talking about some of the major projects that are going ahead here in Sydney and so forth. And I said, pray tell me a couple of them. And he explained a few of them. I said, oh, that's interesting. One of those I actually audit. And he said, oh, you'll be very pleased to know that we have the software that will cover everything you require. And I said, okay, tell me a little bit more. And he said, we've involved so much, particularly now with AI, that we can use world experience, which AI gathers and puts into a blob, and we can use that. And we're using that to put in some of the big engineering projects here in Sydney. And I said, where does that leave the specific issues of each of the specific projects that you're talking about with their specific issues they have? Oh, but nothing more specific than what we've gathered from around the world. And I said, well, no. I said, that can't be the case because, and I just mentioned to him, I said, every organisation that I audit is unique in some way. So they have unique processes, unique steps in those processes. And he said, oh, no, 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 that's all going to change with AI. And I said, well, no, it can't change because if that's the case, quality will suffer. And that's what I'm now seeing. I'm seeing quality is suffering, and sometimes it is completely unintentional because
Yeah.
the senior leaders of the business leave a lot of some of this to software programs and things. And an example of that is engineering companies that have software that runs their engineering project processes. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on this morning, where clearly over a period of time, quality is beginning to suffer, whereas I go in and have a look and I step them backwards from the process. So I look at the outcome, step them back from the outcome to the start. And quite often, as you step them back, you find that, oh, you used to put this process in this way and handle it this way. Oh, no, no, AI had changed that. And I said, in what way? And they try to explain it, and eventually they realise that AI has actually cut out that part of the process.
Uh-huh.
So in actual fact, quality suffers. And this is what we're now seeing around the world is quality is suffering. And we're now concentrating a lot more and bringing this back to quality is people. Quality is the involvement of people in every step of that process. And as Marcus discussed with you over the last couple of weeks,
Uh-huh.
it's all to do with cognitive thinking, having that insight and that oversight into everything we do.
Mhm. Right. And it's great how you frame it. AI may power the system, but people still steer the direction because without values, awareness, and empathy, most especially, even the best tech can run off course. And I think that's where leadership is really being tested right now, not just in what it knows, but in how it leads. And speaking of which, Ian, you've often pointed out that there's still a global gap in leadership capability. Despite the abundance of leadership programs and resources today, you've observed that many leaders are still struggling to adapt, especially when faced with complex, unpredictable situations. From your experience with ACI Global, Ian, what are some of the biggest capability gaps you're seeing in leadership right now and what's driving them?
I think the capability gaps are becoming more because there's a tendency to accept um, training modules, to the acceptance of them to become generic and cost a lot less costly
Mhm.
and a lot less complicated. And I come across this quite often in my audits where I'll sit down with people and they'll provide me a skills matrix and things like that. And a couple of times, most of the times, I simply ask them to say, okay, well, that's fine, but how do you determine a person has what capabilities they have and how often that is being reviewed as per their tasks? And generally they come back, most often they come back, oh, we leave that up to the training manager and which now is working on software programs and so forth. And I say, well, you can't do that. You have to always go back to each person's task, their capability, make sure that's verified and validated. And this is where it becomes, again, so important people are involved and not machine learning. And this is where I think what's happening in the world today, I think that a lot of leaders of the organisations are sort of leaving this to the lower level managers within the organisations to allow that to be covered off by software programming and things like that. And again, that was evident talking to the software engineer that sat next to me on the plane over to Singapore. And, when I constantly kept getting him to go back and concentrate on people, and he eventually came back to the point, no, 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 we don't leave that up to people. That's all been put into the algorithms, right? And that's where I then honed in on what I've discussed with you before in reference to, okay, so someone's developed an algorithm, okay, so we as business owners and leaders and employees and managers have to have the ability to say, well, okay, there's the algorithms. Who put that algorithm together? What was their capability of being able to put that together? What is the oversight into that as it moves forward? And this is where the fellow said, no, no, that's all left up to the software engineers. And I said, well, it can't just be left up to the software engineers.
Mhm.
Someone has to be held accountable. And
Right.
what I ultimately said to this guy, I said, well, that's fine, you having that opinion, but if something comes seriously adrift, I have to stand up there and say, well, okay, the software engineer that's in charge of that algorithm, he's the one responsible. Yes, I know his phone number, I know his contact details. I will put you in touch with him, and then it goes to that next step. But we don't even have any of that information in reference to the algorithms. And you said before where there's a tendency for AI to be powering systems. I
Uh-huh.
always like to say, well, no, it's not the AI that's powering the systems, it's always the people. And
Mm,
that's why we're now trying to go back and concentrate on saying people are the ones that are powering the process.
mm.
People are the ones that are all important within the organisation. And again, this comes back to why we're talking about this issue, because now we're refocusing that in reference to quality back to leadership, because AI is not the driver. The driver is the leadership of the organisation, and the leaderships are made up of people of the organisation, and that's where it has to remain.
Yeah, that's true. It's like we've built leaders who can manage efficiency, but not necessarily uncertainty. And I remember, as you said before, Ian, awareness of the world beyond one's role, political, social, environmental, is no longer optional, which brings us neatly to something new that ACI Global has introduced, the PESEL assessment, as part of the ISO personal recertification process. So this new assessment, Ian, evaluates leaders on their understanding of some critical issues. Seems like to be a significant step forward. Could you walk us through how this PESEL framework helps leaders demonstrate that broader, more global understanding, and why it's now such a vital part of leadership recertification?
Well, again, this has been born out of experience that I've been able to gain over a number of years, even before AI arrived in its full
Mhm.
intensity. And this is where, as you said, we look at the political aspects. And quite often, I ask organisations that I deal with. But going back to our holiday, I was handed a bill from our accommodation in Lords, and the fellow was just about to hand it to me, actually handed it to me. And he said, "Oh, sorry, look, I've got to add a tax." And
Uh-huh.
I said, "Oh, okay, is this your tax?" And he said, "No, it's a government tax." And I said,
Okay.
"Pray tell me more." And he said, "No, this is a tourist tax that the French government have put on all accommodation centres throughout France." And I said, and he said to me, he said, "I don't have any say in it, but I've got to add it to your bill." And I said, "Well, that's a bit rough that you're
Yeah.
going to charge someone who's coming to use your accommodation. You're going to charge me a tax, right?"
Uh-huh.
And then I said to him, I said, "Are you responsible for that tax?" And he said, "No, no, that's the government." I said, "But in actual fact, you are still responsible." "Oh,
Uh-huh.
no, no, Mr. Erskine," in his broken English, he said, "I'm not responsible because I don't have any say in it."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're saying. In actual fact, as leaders of organisations, you do have a say in the political aspects of your business. You
Uh-huh.
have you have your own business organisations and industry groups where you should be working with, and you
Yeah.
should collectively be working together to say to government, "No, we don't want any more taxes on our business, because the more taxes you put in our business, we're going to have a situation where Mr. Erskine's going to say to us, 'Oh, you're going to charge me the extra tax. I'm not going to stay with you.'"
Yeah.
So that's one side, that's political. And then economic. Obviously, as governments have a huge impact on the economy, the business themselves have an impact on the economy as well. So you have to run your business efficiently, right? Sociological, all the different avenues of society have to be addressed, right? Because if they're not understood, somewhere along the line, things come adrift,
Yeah.
right? Technical. Now, technical is the really big one now, where we talk about AI is now being introduced, and very much evident to me and many other people throughout the world are now finding that senior managers and business directors, chairmen of the board, and things like that, they don't have any idea of the impact of AI, because this has just been left to
Mm-hmm.
middle managers and supervisors and things like that. So they need to have that idea. A leader needs to understand that.
Yeah.
A leader needs to understand his legal requirements. Going back to the motel owner, he has a duty of care, not just to his clients like Loretta and I, but he has a duty of care to his employees, right? So if he just sits back and allows government to add extra taxes, extra taxes, extra taxes, sooner or later he comes to the opinion and says, "Oh, I'm now going to have to close my doors because I can't afford to run my business."
Mm-hmm.
That impacts the people that he's employed, right? That's where his primary duty of care then kicks in and says, you can't, that's something you can't do. You have to be aware that you have to run your business with your people on board and aware that you have an impact on them if you do the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that we put all that together in what is called a pestle analysis, right? Now, this is something that is now beginning to evolve with ACI Global, and we'll cover this a lot more in depth over the next 2 weeks when we
Yeah.
specifically drill into it. But this is where this comes into uh, true leadership training.
Yeah. It's essentially encouraging them to connect the dots between the
Yes,
economy, people, tech, politics, sustainability, because leadership today really is about understanding independence, right? As you've said.
yes, and let's go back to the impact of the episode that we had in reference to environmental and sustainability, the um, the Earth Hour.
Earth, yeah. Mm-hmm.
One where I explained the damage that had been done to Mount Kosciuszko, the
Mm-hmm.
company that had actually bulldozed half a kilometre wide tracks up and over the tops of the mountain.
Yeah.
Now, I explained there that leadership of that company are accountable. They
Yeah.
can't just simply say, "Oh, because the government's passed rules and regulations said, oh no, you don't have to worry about the environmental laws. Just go ahead and bulldoze all the trees down and everything like that."
Mm-hmm.
No, the leadership of that company, true leadership, are accountable.
Right.
So
And
that's where we're going to link that into our ISO personal certification of
mhm,
our leadership courses with the pestle, which will be up forefront, where people will have to demonstrate their understanding of every step within the pestle analysis.
yeah, the pestle assessment. And that brings me to the next part, Ian, how this actually builds capability over time. The new ISO personal recertification process at ACI Global spans 3 years, which is quite different from the usual train once, get certified forever approach we often see everywhere. How does this long term structure help professionals not only stay compliant, but continuously grow in capability, leadership, and strategic thinking?
Well, again, this is grown from my experience as a third party auditor in management systems, where the system actually runs, the certification runs for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it started off, and then you have two surveillance